Shalom Havarim. Hello, friends. As you may have noticed, it is beautiful outside. I mean, sure, by the time you're watching this, you're probably getting some rain, but I'm recording this on Friday at about 4:45 p.m., and it's gorgeous outside. The weather is perfect, and it's 72 degrees. And for the last couple of days, I've been telling Sonia, we need to get our Irish chairs out. And usually when I say something like that, she just kind of ignores me because she knows that I want her to ask. So I kept saying it over and over again. I said, we need to get our Irish chairs out. The weather is perfect. And after I said it several times, she finally just broke down. She said, okay, I know you want me to ask. So what are you talking about? What is an Irish chair? And I said to her, oh, you know, Patty O Furniture. Patty O Furniture. All right, much love to my Irish friends. Okay, so we are in week 3 of social distancing and week 5 of Lent. And for the last couple of weeks, I've gone away from my normal routine. I've gone away from some of the series that I've been preaching on, and I've even gone away from the lectionary text. But today we're circling back to pick up this lectionary text for today because it seems very appropriate. And in fact, this passage has one of my favorite verses in all of the New Testament, and also what I think to be one of the most important verses for all of my theology. So this passage comes to us from John chapter 11. It's verses 1 through 45. It's the story of Lazarus, his death, and his resurrection. So I just want to give you a little bit of background. Jesus was really good friends with this guy named Lazarus and his two sisters, Mary and Martha. And he would frequently visit with them. He would stay in their home. They were just like 3 of his closest friends. Well, Lazarus got sick, and Mary and Martha knew that he wasn't going to make it. So they sent word to Jesus. He was far away at the time. They said, hey, you better come. Lazarus is sick. We need your help. But Jesus took his good old sweet time getting there. He wasn't in a hurry. He was stopping and smelling the roses and chatting with the neighbors. And when he finally got to the home of Lazarus, Mary, and Martha, it was too late. Lazarus had died. And not only had he had died 4 days earlier. So Jesus gets there, he shows up, and Martha and Mary, they both come to him individually, one at a time, and each of them say to him, they say, Jesus, if you would have just been here, you could have done something. But it's too late. And it's interesting because Jesus never confronts them. He says, no, I couldn't have done anything, or I was doing what I had to do, and I had all these things I had to take care of first. He doesn't try to explain it away. He just is there for them. And he doesn't disagree with them. He's like, yeah, you're right. I could have saved them. He gives no excuses. He gives no reasons. So we come to this passage then where Jesus decides he is going to do something because, he's Jesus and he still can. And he orders the people to go to the grave of Lazarus, where he's been for 4 days, and orders them to remove the stone that's covering the grave. And this brings us to verse 39, my favorite passage of scripture in all of John's gospel, maybe all the New Testament. And of course, you have to read chapter 11, verse 39 from the King James Version, where Martha responds with my favorite scripture, and she says, he stinketh. I don't know why that's my favorite. It makes me giggle every time. He stinketh. But it also is the same section of scripture where I find that most important passage. It's verse 35, and it's one of, I think, if not the shortest verse in the English version translation of the New Testament. It's 2 simple words, and I think it says more about Jesus than all the books that have been written about him throughout all the years. Those two simple words that we find in verse 35 tell us Jesus wept. He stinketh, and Jesus wept. So the question now is how do we apply this to today? How do we apply this to what we're seeing around us? We are in this world where we can't avoid this conversation about the coronavirus, about COVID-19. And when I think about my favorite passage, I realize that a lot of you stinketh. Like, come on, people. Social distancing is not an excuse for poor hygiene. Please continue to bathe. But actually, what I'm talking about, I'm using this metaphorically. I don't know how you smell, but I think some of the theology and the reasoning and the way we treat people, that stinketh. I think especially of what I'm seeing online. Unfortunately, when we are forced inside and forced to avoid one another in person, I go to social media, and I spend way too much time clicking through my Facebook feed, scrolling up and seeing what's going on there. And everybody has an opinion, and everybody thinks they should share it. And you're entitled to your own opinion, but sometimes these opinions are, I think, hurtful and damaging. For instance, one of my friends who meant very well, actually, I've seen something similar from a number of friends. She wrote this on her Facebook page. She wrote, God said, you want to worship athletes? I will shut down the stadiums. You want to worship musicians? I will shut down civic centers. You want to worship actors? I will shut down theaters. You want to worship money? I will shut down the economy and collapse the stock market. Well, that's interesting, but churches are also closed. Schools are also closed. Do you think God didn't want people to worship together? Do you think God didn't want us to get educations, to send our kids to school? I think the reasoning kind of breaks down there a little bit. And the challenge is there's just enough truth in that. I think that there are people who worship athletes. I've probably fallen victim to this many times. People who worship money, people who worship actors. I get the reasoning. There's some grain of truth to that. The problem is, I don't think God caused the coronavirus. And I sure don't think God's going to cause all these people to get sick and some people to die because of the idolatry that a few people are experiencing. And there's even worse than that out there on Facebook and on social media. And sometimes, my friends, it's just good to turn the device off. God didn't cause this. Now, James chapter 1, verse 17 reminds us that all good things come from God. All good things are a gift from, I believe the language is, our Father in heaven. And I thoroughly believe that every good gift comes from God. The problem is that doesn't mean that the inverse is also true. Just because God is the giver of all good things doesn't mean that God also causes all bad things. For instance, let me tell you a little story about my week. And this is one of those examples where I serve as a God character, so it's very humbling, right? So it's a metaphor, it's an example of how this might work. My daughter Hadley turned 8 years old this past week. And for a number of months, she has wanted a specific bed for her doll. Every time we go into the store and we see this bed, she makes sure to point out, that's the bed that I want for my doll babies. Okay, we got it. I know what you want. So just before her birthday, her brother and I went to the store. We picked up this bed. We brought it home. I got some wrapping paper. She's really into avocados right now for some reason. So there's avocados on this wrapping paper. I got this special wrapping paper just for her. Wrapped up this doll baby bed. We placed it with her other presents. She opened it up and it was exactly what she wanted. I got a lot of credit for that. I got her the doll baby bed. Then she started playing with it. She opened it up and saw that something was wrong. As we looked, it seemed like someone had taken a bottle of glitter glue while it was still in the store and gone to this baby bed and just squeezed the glue on the mattress of the bed and left it like that. and I didn't notice it until after we got it home. I was the giver of the good gift. Does that necessarily mean that I caused the bad thing to happen? No, it doesn't. Likewise with God. God is the giver of all good things. It doesn't mean God causes the bad. Now, it's true that God does allow bad things to happen. And if it's also true, I think it is true that Jesus is the clearest manifestation, the clearest example that we have of God here on earth. Jesus says himself, if you've seen me, you've seen God. The Bible tells us that in Jesus, the fullness of God did dwell. So I believe that Jesus is fully God. If you want to know what God is like, you look at Jesus. And in the story of Mary and Martha and Lazarus, there's no accusation that Jesus caused this bad thing to happen to Lazarus. No one said, Jesus, you caused Lazarus to die. You killed him. No. But he did allow it to happen. And likewise, God allows bad things to happen. It doesn't mean that God caused it, but God does allow things. And I'm sure that many of us have questions, and we can ask those questions about why does God allow them to happen? And you know what? That's okay. It's okay to ask those questions. Mary and Martha asked Jesus, like, why didn't you come sooner? Why didn't you help out? Why didn't you do this? And the truth is, we won't have answers. But what we do know is not the answer to the why, but we know what. What does God do in these situations? Well, again, if Jesus is the clearest example that we have of who God is, we know that in that situation, when Lazarus died, God was weeping. So where is God in the middle of this COVID-19? Well, I think that when we suffer, God suffers with us. When we experience pain, God experiences pain along beside us. When we weep, God weeps. When we hurt, God hurts. And we can ask those difficult questions, why don't you do something about it, God? We don't know the answer, but we know that God will always be there with us in that situation. And furthermore, we know that there are times when God causes good things to happen in bad situations. For example, Jesus brought Lazarus back from the dead. That was a good thing. And as we were walking around town earlier today on this beautiful day, we just noticed there's some beautiful things taking place in our community. I'm sure I'm not the only one. Probably others in this community have taken place in this bear hunt that's going on, where families have been invited to put teddy bears in the windows of their houses and go out with their families looking either by car or on foot and keeping their social distance of 6 feet between people and just looking for these teddy bears around town. We found, I think, 111 teddy bears on our walk today. And each person that we approach or we come close to, not too close, but we come close to, people are happy to see us. And it's not even people that we know. It's just like, hey, you're another human being. It's good to see you. People are talking to strangers. People are being kind to one another. I think there's something beautiful in that. Did God cause the COVID-19 outbreak to happen? No, I don't think so. Could God have stopped it? Perhaps. It's okay to ask those questions. But what we do know that is in the midst of this, God suffers with us. And that God can use this too for something good. All right, friends. Have a great week and continue to be awesome to one another.